I don't think anyone cares about trust.
They can accept China as powerful, but not always as culturally or technologically leading.
The West has always been seen as a supreme tech leadership, but I do think that narrative is changing a lot.
I don't think any Chinese companies that set out thinking I must succeed in the West, but they also don't do themselves any favors, right?
It's one thing to automate tasks. It's another thing for workers to be asked to actively participate in their own abstraction.
We're not talking like a chatbot in a text window. This is a lifelike digital human.
They don't really care where it's coming from as long as it's making their lives more efficient.
Hello and welcome to episode 111 of Disconnected. I'm your host, Jag Sharma, joined by my co-hosts Jen Campbell in Hong Kong and Felina Tan in London. And together, we'll be delving into the world of AI, tech and social media and how it's impacting society and culture. Coming up, China keeps producing the kinds of tech stories that make the rest of the world sit up. From humanoid robots running half marathons to Huawei building luxury cars that are beating legacy Western brands to Chinese consumer brands exporting everything from bubble tea to sportswear at global scale. So the question is China now the king of tech? And if so, can the West actually deal with the reality without defaulting to fear, defensiveness, or outright xenophobia? Felina takes us into a story from China's tech workforce, where employees are being pushed to train AI versions of themselves, turning workflow, judgment, and even personality into something that can be copied, scaled, and potentially replace them. And Jen is looking at Sora, OpenAI's once hyped video tool that's now being shut down, and asking what happens when one of the most talked about AI products in the world turns out to be commercially unsustainable. All of this, as well as other trending topics. Right then, guys, let's get straight into it. And you know what? I'll kick us off today. And I've been thinking a lot lately about the way we live in the West and talk about China when it comes to technology. Because more and more, the stories coming out of China are not just impressive, they're symbolic. A humanoid robot runs a half marathon faster than the human world record. Huawei builds a luxury car that starts beating Porsche, Mercedes, and BMW in China's premium market. Chinese consumer brands go from being seen as cheap and copycat to becoming globally desirable, design-led, fast-moving, culturally relevant brands. And I think the uncomfortable question sitting underneath all of this is, what if China isn't just catching up anymore? What if China is actually setting the pace? Because for a long time, the Western narrative around Chinese technology has been quite convenient. It was, they manufacture, we innovate. They replicate, we create. They scale, but we lead. And that narrative is becoming harder and harder to maintain. Because what we're seeing now is not just manufacturing power. It's systems thinking. It's ecosystem building. It's speed. It's design. It's execution. And increasingly, it's customer aspiration too. And I think that creates a psychological problem in the West. Because people are comfortable with China being efficient, they are less comfortable with China being cool. They are less comfortable with China being premium. And they are even more less comfortable with the idea that Chinese firms might start defining what the future looks like. And this is where I think it gets tricky, because some of the pushback against Chinese technology is legitimate. Concerns around data, state influence, censorship, geopolitical leverage, those are real issues. But mixed in with that, there can also be something else. Insecurity, protectionism, cultural bias, and at times, a kind of reflexive xenophobia, where people don't just question the product, they question whether they're emotionally willing to accept leadership from China at all. And that matters, because if a robot from China beats a human record, if Huawei beats luxury incumbents, if China brands start winning globally, the question isn't just whether the tech is good. It's whether the rest of the world can absorb a new reality without turning it into a cultural threat. And maybe that's the deeper story here. Not is China innovative, because it clearly is, but can the West psychologically handle a future in which technological prestige, technological desire, and technological leadership are no longer assumed to belong to the West? Because that's not just an economic adjustment, that's an identity adjustment. So I guess, Jen, Felina, my question to you is, are we witnessing a genuine shift in global tech leadership? And if we are, do Western societies know how to respond to this with clarity rather than fear? Keen for your thoughts.
Well, I'm really interested in this because I constantly think I've brought it up on Disconnected a few times, like the next big technology or AI shift will come from China. And for many reasons, they have a history. To your point, they have a lot of history in being able to deliver. And, I don't know whether I'm exposed to it more, obviously being in Hong Kong, but the amount of robot stuff you see, there are robots dancing, their drone shows normally include robots of some sorts. Like, they've moved on from fireworks shows for celebrations, and they really have moved more into a tech era. So I'm not surprised they have robots running half marathons. I'm almost certain if you went into their factories, they were using robotics before anywhere else in the world probably was. And I do think that they are becoming more trusted, but it sure takes longer for them to get there. And so if you look at the likes of Huawei or Xiaomi or, even Alibaba to some extent, they build their following within China first, and then they let the rest of the world catch up to them. I don't think any Chinese companies that set out thinking I must succeed in the West, like their market is their home market. They know the money is there for them to become big. The problem is, the reasons you listed, Jag, are all issues, but they also don't do themselves any favors, right? So take ByteDance as an example. TikTok's had problems for a long time, but even recently, I think in February, ByteDance launched Cdance, right, their video AI generator. And I'm talking about it a lot at work at the moment because it is technically the best AI video generating tool you can come across. But they have huge IP infringement problems. And even they haven't outright said it, but they have said, we need to scale back. We need to do better. We need to make sure we've got copyright issues in place. But they've said that after they've launched. Whereas if a US company did that, they would come under a lot more scrutiny, and they usually have that kind of risk covered. So I think that the issue I see a lot of the time is that they don't do risk mitigation before they go to market. And they go to market and they have all these problems. And then it takes them 10 years. I mean, Huawei's a great example of it. They've been around for so long. Even, the EV cars, BYD now is all over the place. But when they first launched, I'm sure they had a lot of problems, but they still launched anyway, because they can do that in China. And so I follow it really closely. I kind of look at all the different platforms. I still can't believe that WeChat and the way the platform operates, I can't believe hasn't taken off anywhere else. One app to rule them all. You literally can do everything. You can pay, you can chat, you can research, you can do everything within WeChat. And, it's ring fenced to China. They don't take it out anywhere else, and nowhere else has even tried to do the same thing. So, it's an interesting market. I don't know. Felina, what do you think? You spent a lot of time over here and now based in the UK.
Yeah, I'm so excited that we're getting to this point where China's being seen for its tech leadership. I think more and more people will hopefully realize that sooner rather than later. Because you're right, when you were speaking about the WeChat ecosystem, I was thinking back already to it's amazing. You can book a manicure on there, and you can also order your food from there. You can do all sorts with WeChat, and how with their drone systems, when it comes to food delivery, they can get a drone to freaking drop it off at a specific point. I saw this meme yesterday actually on Instagram, and I was just doom scrolling. I saw this particular video. It was so funny, where this guy relocated to the US, and it's more of a sketch, right? He's from China, and he just ordered some food off DoorDash. And he was saying, just can't believe it. In China, you can get a drone delivering it to you in 10 minutes flat. And then over here in the US, it's all about, waiting 45 minutes for someone with a bicycle to deliver your food. So it's things like that where, yes, the West has always been seen as a supreme tech leadership, but I do think that narrative is changing a lot, a lot. Because if you think about AI platforms as well, nowadays everyone's talking about agents, right? And how agents are going to rule the world. You can create an agent for yourself, agent for all these projects. And the thing is, it really only, I guess, rippled in the last few months, at least in the West. But I remember Manus AI already having this sort of agent capability, probably a year, 18 months back. And Manus, obviously, in the last 6 months or so, got bought by Meta. And so it's one of those things where you're like, okay, Manus AI, it's a Chinese company. And so Meta themselves got really interested. And so this topic is definitely just something that is really exciting. And it should really be talked about more, I think, within even the tech community, because for whatever reason, and Jag, you alluded to it with the xenophobia and how people used to have, and some people still do have, this perception that, made in China. So what that means is it's going to be flimsy, it's not going to be resilient, it's going to be cheap. And you know what? I think that's an archaic mindset. And I really do hope that we have less of that perception as Chinese tech gets more popular on the global stage. And it's going to be interesting, especially even with the new announcement of Apple's latest CEO, with, Tim Cook handing the reins over to John Turnus. Tim obviously did a lot of work with Chinese relations and getting Apple properly set up infrastructure wise with China. It'll be interesting to see what John does as well. Hopefully he continues to foster that and doesn't just shred it to the ground.
Felina, I liked your doom scrolling example of someone from China moving to the US, and then your comments about xenophobia. I think many people are still attached to the old hierarchy. They can accept China as powerful, but not always as culturally or technologically leading. And I think that creates denial, defensiveness, friction. And I think the people that live in that space of being attached to the old hierarchy, it's a larger number than perhaps we may realize. The question for you both, given the fast-paced changes we've seen coming out of China certainly for the past decade, do you think made in China has quietly gone from meaning cheap to meaning, competitive and aspirational?
I do think it has in the technology space. I think you're right. There's a generational shift in it. I think if you asked our parents, they would still think cheap factories making clothes for cheap or whatever. But now, especially like I say, with EV cars being so predominantly from China, and a lot of I think people are really smart to the fact, a lot of mobile phones are made there, lots of technology stuff is coming from there. And then, they kind of know more because TikTok gets in the press so much. So, they know these platforms are coming from there. So what's the saying? There's no such thing as bad PR. It's building a picture for sure. I think people are also getting a little bit more fickle. They don't really care where it's coming from as long as it's making their lives more efficient. And that can only be a good thing in this space, because then people are more adopting of everything that comes from anywhere. I think if anything, we may have more people turning against US-based places due to Trump being there than they do anything else. But younger generations certainly are more adoptive if it's something that betters their life. And I think that is the attitude that people need to move forward with. Let's adopt those things. That's not to say don't do your research. Like, come on, if you're using AI tools that are coming out of China, I do recommend people do research on that first. I would say that about AI tools coming out of anywhere, to be honest, because we know there's been problems across the board in terms of where they are doing their machine learning from. But yeah, I do think younger generations are more accepting, and I've kind of see China as being quite advanced in that space.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's high time that everyone, to use the internet phrase, give China their flowers, which is, just sort of give credit where it's due. And I do think, that's important. And I am so excited for like Chinese tech. I think they've put in a lot of the hard graft, and it's probably the moment is like maybe like this year or something. It's just everything is compounding. Like everything that they've done is compounding. And I do think it's now they're getting a warmer reception. So yes, give them their flowers.
I think in some cases, in some categories, China is no longer the budget alternative. It's the innovation engine. And actually it's probably the biggest under-discussed brand transformations of the last decade, because I don't think there is a stigma attached to made in China anymore. And I think that's a testament to how their brand has changed. However, regardless of age, I think it still depends on the product. So I don't think people necessarily have an issue with a Chinese phone or a Chinese camera like DJI, for example. But then a Huawei car may still cause issues. And, Chinese EV brands, with the exception of BYD, it's still kind of the question mark of how they'll progress. And
saying that though, I have seen a lot of JQ cars in the UK.
I love JQ. They have, I think I talked about it before on the pod, they have a Range Rover copy. Sorry, I know we talked about China's innovation and now I'm talking about them copying, but there is a JQ Range Rover copy. It looks identical, and it's half the price. The fully spec versus the fully spec, it is half the price. If I move back to the UK, I'm getting myself a JQ for sure. But then I don't know if I've contradicted myself there, because I'm praising them for copying a top spec Range Rover and putting a different badge on it.
I don't think that necessarily is a contradiction, right? It's just that with JQ specifically, they found a way to make a car that is as good or maybe even better than a Range Rover, but at a more accessible price point. So like, kudos to them. They've probably figured out a way to manufacture it more cost efficiently while still retaining design and feature elements which are comparative to the Range Rover.
No, completely. Just one more question on this, and then I think we'll move on. Do you guys think all of this is even really about technology, or is it about the West losing the comfort of being seen as the default center of progress?
Well, that is a big question, isn't it? I think there is an element of that in there. I think, there's a hierarchy power play in there somewhere, and I don't think people are willing to give it up too quickly.
That will always be the main question. And even if people say, oh, no, there isn't an element of that. Yeah, right, there isn't. There's always that subtext. I don't think it will ever go away. Ever, ever, ever.
Never, ever?
I don't think it will. I really
Never,
don't.
ever, ever.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet big money that will never ever go away. I really think so. I don't know why, but it's just ingrained in society, unfortunately. And you know what? I was thinking about this. Could it be also because the language that is being spoken between like the Chinese and like the West is different? That also plays a part. I don't know why, but I think it's something that's ingrained in society,
Mm.
which is a shame. Because just because someone speaks a different language from you, like a native language from you, it doesn't mean that they're any less smarter.
I think geopolitics comes into play aside from language, because if we look back in recent history, there was certainly less push against Japanese brands in the 80s and 90s when they were having their surge. You know, people proudly told their neighbors and friends when they bought a Sony television in the 80s or 90s. So there might be an aspect of geopolitics that plays into this, that, you know, if our political values are not aligned, then we don't just fear competition, you know, we fear a lot more than that. And I think it might be that they fear a loss of narrative control. And so buying a Chinese phone or buying a DJI camera may not feel like a loss of narrative control because it's a small product, but picking the Huawei luxury vehicle over a BMW or a Mercedes may feel just a bridge too far and a step towards losing that narrative control. Anyway, let's leave that topic where it is and let's move on. And you know what? Let's stick with China, because Felina, you've got China AI-related updates to share with us.
I know I do. The first story that I have is actually from an MIT tech review. So it's one of those stories where you read the headline and you think that can't be real. And then you read it and go, oh, actually, it's very, very real. So tech workers in China are being told by their bosses to train AI agents to do their own jobs. Not a colleague's job, not some generic task, but the actual day-to-day work. And the way it kicked off is kind of funny because there's this GitHub project called Colleague Skill that went viral on Chinese social media earlier in April. So there's an engineer, his name is Tianyi Cho. He was the one who put it together, whereby how it works is you name a coworker, you add a few profile details, and the tool will actually pull in chat history and files from Lock and DingTalk, which are the big workplace apps over in China. And what it does is it spits out a manual of how that person does their job. So from tasks to like little habits, the quirks, all of it, it's ready for like an AI agent to replicate. And one of the workers in this piece by MIT, her name's Amber. She's 27. She's based in Shanghai. She actually tried it on a former coworker just to see what would happen. And basically within minutes, it captured how that person worked, how they reacted to things, and even their punctuation habits. So her words were, and this is verbatim, it is surprisingly good. So now she's using an AI agent as a stand-in coworker that helps her debug, code, and replies instantly to other coworkers. She did say that it feels a little bit like uncanny and uncomfortable, but it's a big help. And there are many other folks within China who are picking up on this particular colleague skill. So someone on Red Note, the social media channel, posted that, you know, a farewell can now be turned into like warm tokens. So for example, you've got people who have left the company, but essentially you could use it in a way where it's quite positive. So essentially, that is one of the latest things that people are using AI for. And again, the way that it sparked off was just through a GitHub code created by this engineer. That's one. The second story is about how the AI avatar of a grieving daughter's dad has been created. So there's this 47-year-old woman in Liaoning province. She lost her dad to cancer. 2 years ago, she went to a company called Superbrain, and she actually asked them to build an AI avatar of him. we're not talking like a chatbot in a text window. This is a lifelike digital human. So what this means is she can see him, she can hear him, she can have conversations with him. She told the AFP that talking to the avatar actually made her feel, in her words, fully recharged in an instant and filled with motivation once again. Her friends have actually said that they're worried about her, that because she'll get dependent on it, that she won't move on, that it's a kind of false comfort. However, this lady has said that even if the comfort itself is simulated, the love behind it is real. So anyway, it comes back to what Jag was saying earlier around like the Chinese tech acceleration and how this is scaling at a massive, massive pace. But also the other side to it is the fact that regulation is also scrambling to catch up. But yeah, I guess there's a line about digital humans not being allowed to produce content that then threatens national security, all that sort of things that we should care about. But yeah, those are actually the two recent stories that I picked up on Chinese AI. And I do think, again, we were talking about how China isn't just acing the hardware and the robotics side. They're really running huge life experiments on what it means to work alongside AI and what it means to live alongside it or grieve alongside it. So yeah, perhaps it just matters on like what day you're having, whether you find that exciting or unsettling. But yeah.
A lot to unpack there, Felina. Don't know quite how to take those stories, but let's cover the tech workers training their AI doubles first, because that story, I think, for me, I mean, it feels incredibly modern, but then I feel quite bleak, listening to you go through it, because on the surface, it's about productivity, automation, getting better documentation, but underneath, I think it's really something more human. And that's what makes it so unsettling, because what does it do to a person when they're asked to turn their own judgment, their own quirks, their own tone, their own workflow into something that can outlive them professionally and maybe even replace them? Because it's one thing to automate tasks, but it's another thing for workers to be asked to actively participate in their own abstraction.
Yeah.
To flatten themselves into a system.
No, it's true. But you know what's so funny, right? Is while you were saying that, I was thinking about how there are moments when we're all so busy with work on a specific day and we'll joke to colleagues where we'll say, oh, if only we could clone ourselves, hey? And you know how this is actually like a solution to like cloning yourself. But you're right. Be careful what you wish for, I guess, because it could be a little bit too close to home.
Well,
so.
my clone will know how lazy I am. He'll know he'll know after lunch he's getting nothing done for at least 2 hours. So it'll be like I'll wait till he goes to the bathroom and then I'll just choke him out with a wire, take him out, completely replace him. We don't need him. Anyway.
Yeah, be careful which of your colleagues you clone is the takeaway from that then, Jack. I also am very conflicted on it though, because there are benefits to it. And there are a few use cases that I can think of there's benefits to it. If somebody's leaving the company, okay, I'm going to go back to agency life when you have client relationships. So if someone's leaving the company, they've got a really good relationship with the client, their notice period might be a month, let's say, or you haven't found someone to replace them in time. And there's a bit of a bridge between the two. To be able to have somebody who knows the client really well and be able to speak to them in the way that they could speak and be able to have somebody, to be able to have an agent who can do that piece and you can smooth the transition over, great. What would actually happen is you would never get rid of that person in the business and people would just assume they still work for you. And then it becomes, your own self-brand IP. Like, are people allowed to keep you on once you've left a business? And the answer to that is obviously no. There needs to be ethics put in against that, because otherwise what's the point? Do you start a job at one company and then you live there forever? Like, it makes no sense. So I can see benefits to it. Like you go on holiday, for example, and you still need some stuff to get done. Great, let your agent run it. And when you get back, give you a full breakdown and summary of what's gone on while you were away. But once you leave a company, I think there's going to have to be some heavy regulation put in place.
That's
to
true.
say,
It should leave
once
with you as well.
Exactly. You take your avatar with you. Exactly that. Like you have your own little hard drive that you take yourself away on and you take to the next place. All that time you spent training it. Why isn't it your own IP? That's your own personality right there.
I like the fact that you said, yeah, it's your own IP, because it is. and nobody should be able to own it except you. Because, yeah.
But then the similar issue with the second case that you brought up, because it's all kind of nice that this woman's found comfort in her father, that she can bring back as an avatar. And I don't agree with it, because I think the human body is designed for grief in many different ways and people have to be able to deal with that. But equally, what if a complete stranger dies and I create an avatar of them? And does it not then become a bit creepy if, you're a celebrity stalker and you create an avatar of a celebrity? Like, it's their IP. It's not your IP to own and bring back. And there should be something that says, if something happens to me, I'm happy for my family to create an avatar of me. I'm not happy for Jag to create an avatar of me who does his work for him, Like, it's people's own IP. And I think people need to be in control of it.
You know how we have that thing where you can opt in or opt out to be an organ donor?
Yeah,
We're
exactly
going to
that.
opt in and opt out of whether you're allowed to be created into an avatar.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Just so you both know that you both opted in to me cloning your voices in case you do pass on. And
right.
I just keep you going on the pod. That was an automatic opt-in.
Just send me the contract that I signed, please. Thank you.
It was a verbal contract. I'll just do it. No one's going to know. Who's going to come after me? No one. I doubt your husband listens to Disconnected, so I'll get away with it.
He'll just be thrilled I'm not around anymore, to be fair.
You can share the royalties though, right, Jag? If you use our voices for anything that you do, feel free to, share the royalties.
I can share the cost burden if you want. I think for the Avatar story, do you know what? I found that one, again, I was torn. I found it incredibly moving, but also unsettling. Because on one level, it's not hard to understand. Someone loses a parent, they feel grief, they feel loneliness, absence, and technology offers them a way to hear that voice again, see that face again, and feel even for a moment for that connection to come back. And we use technology already to remember lost parents. Even before the advent of video, we still had photography. And when people were feeling grief or loneliness or sadness about a lost parent, they would look at old photos of their parents to feel for a moment that connection coming back. So emotionally, it makes sense to me because grief is not rational. It doesn't move in a straight line. And if technology can soften the sharpness of loss, then I think a lot of people would find that very hard to resist. But at the same time, this is where I think AI starts to move into very intimate and, as you guys put it, morally complicated spaces, because this isn't just a chatbot helping you, organize your calendar or book your nail appointment. This is technology stepping into one of the most vulnerable parts of human life, which is mourning. That raises some uncomfortableness and some big questions. The question to you both on this: if comfort is artificial, but if the love behind it is real, does that make it any less meaningful?
What a loaded question.
It feels like a mind twister.
If a tree falls in a forest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Say it again.
What, if a tree falls in a forest?
No.
If the comfort is artificial, but if the love behind it is real, does that make this any less meaningful?
So, but what do you mean by the love? The love of the person who's created the avatar?
Yes.
Okay, understand. What about all those people, the few people in the world who marry a roller coaster? like the grief bit is slightly different, but this has been around forever, right? People have always been in love with like inanimate objects, and the idea of someone. It's the fandom thing, right? They think they know somebody, they're in love with them, but actually they've got zero relationship with them. I think.
No, but this was her father.
Yeah, I know, but that's a very specific set. That's the thing. That's her father. But what if I told you it was a 60-year-old man and he's made an avatar of a 6-year-old girl? Like, do you know what I mean? It spirals very quickly into being really out of control.
So, okay. So, understood on the inappropriateness level, and thanks for coming up with the grossest one that you could come to mind on. You could have gone with the lady in Japan that married an AI avatar, but
to be fair, Jen did start with the roller coaster one.
No,
so.
she went with Daily Mail plus Epstein plus something else.
I didn't think you were getting it when I said someone married a roller coaster. None of you seemed to make a face that you knew what I was talking about, so I thought I had to go a bit deeper.
But, okay. So even with the disgusting examples, I think the question still stands. If the comfort is artificial, but the love behind it is real, does that make it any less meaningful? I guess from what you're saying, Jen, it doesn't make it any less meaningful? It doesn't make it any less meaningful? Is that what you're saying?
It doesn't make it any less meaningful. I think maybe yes. I'm really confused by the question, if I'm honest.
Well, you took it that way. I was focusing it on, I really meant it related to the story, but there we go.
Hey, don't let anyone judge you. I think it's subjective, and if it's meaningful to you, it is meaningful to you.
Do you know what? We owe Jen a receipt. The next time she asks a question, we'll just bring it to pedophilia and then put her on the, put her in the same situation. I feel we can't end this story here. We have to continue for a bit before we move on. Do you know what? Let's come back to the first story you shared, Felina. So I've got a question for you on that one, and then we'll move on. So Felina, on your first topic, just one question, then we'll move on. What happens to dignity at work when your personality, tone, and judgment start being treated like data? And for additional context on this, I'm coming at it from the perspective of I really see this as potentially something deeper: alienation, loss of dignity, reduction of personhood into process. But I'm just keen for your perspective of it in the sense of, value being documented.
I think value, like you say, that's a strong point. Like, because some who really, really value the work that they do might fall into this idea of feeling like they're being commoditized, and that is just not great, is it? It undermines who you are as a person, and it doesn't make you unique anymore because suddenly you can be replicated like 100 times over. So I personally think it's quite disingenuous and it's not very dignified. I would worry about that. That said, though, if there were a few more measures whereby they regulate who owns the IP, like if you own it and you can take it with you, you can delete it and it's not stored somewhere secret, I might still explore the idea of making an AI agent that is me, that is a replication of me, but knowing that I'm able to get rid of it at any point in time. You know how that thing that people always say, once it's on the internet, it's on the internet forever. Like, I don't want it to become that for like these AI agents, because that would be scary. And if there's a slight risk of even that, I'm not going to create a coworker. That's me.
I would love a Felina backup, because then we can get more Felina on more disconnected podcast episodes. We can get a committed Felina. But I agree with you. I think the more human texture gets captured, the more uncomfortable this becomes. I think this is where it becomes emotionally and ethically messy. And you know what? Let's not go to Jen for an answer on this question, and let's move on to Jen's topic, actually. Jen, you've got a nice update for us on Sora.
Yeah, just a quick one to end us on. I know we don't have long, but Sora is no more, actually. That is the update. Now, this isn't new news. It was as of the end of March. OpenAI came out and said they were shutting down the Sora app and the API from April onwards. It was only live for 6 months. Can you believe it? The shortest amount of time, probably. And things been up for a while. And they've come out and said it's because they're focusing more on robotics. They're moving the business to focus more on robotics. So it's actually what it boils down to is the commercials around the way they set Sora up. And actually it's quite refreshing to see a company launch something, make a big song and dance, and then have to admit that actually they hadn't got the commercials right on it in the first place. So just to give a bit of background, the mainstream Sora app actually launched in September 2025. And it looked really promising, right? In the first month, they had 3.33 million downloads of this app. It dropped to 1.1 million by February. So it's probably an indication of the way this was going. But it was reported that of all the downloads, people were creating 10-second videos. And actually, the death of Sora was people creating memes. So while, Felina's there doom scrolling and finding all these memes on Instagram, that's probably been what's caused the death of Sora, because actually the cost of each meme, every 10-second video was around $1.30, and it goes up to about $3 for a 4K video, which doesn't sound like a lot. But if you compare that to the likes of ChatGPT that's computing text in like a fraction of a cent, it's actually very expensive to create video. And they were doing it under subscription. So people were paying $20 a month, people were paying up to $200 a month, but it wasn't an awful lot. So you could create as many as you wanted within that. And it really raises an issue with the pricing model of video. And actually, it's a bit promising, I would say, for anyone in a creative industry, because it shows these models don't work and that people can't just generate as much content as they want for a really cheap price. And if you look at kind of other video platforms that do still exist, the likes of Kling, for example, they work on a credit basis in exactly the same way stock images have always worked. A stock platform pays a photographer an image, and then depending on how much that image costs is how many stock points, how stock units it costs to get the image back. And so, if you're creating a 4K video that's actually costing the likes of $3 to create, it's going to cost you 10 units rather than 1 unit to create a meme for Felina to see on Instagram. So I think the admission really from OpenAI is that they got that subscription model wrong and they couldn't sustain it. It was losing up to $1 million a day by the time it got shut down. And there was obviously a massive decline also because other platforms were better than them. They didn't have the technology in place to be good at video. They had the names, like Sam Altman came out. He announced they were doing it. Everyone thought, ChatGPT is so great. They must also have a really good video platform. And even Disney backed them. So they had a 3-year licensing agreement with Disney that was going through, where Disney were going to put in $1 billion into OpenAI, into Sora. And it meant that users could use up to 200 characters, Star Wars, Disney, whatever it might be, to create their own video content. Thankfully for Disney, not a penny of that got spent before the thing got shut down. And it's interesting because I do think it's good to see some of these platforms fail a little bit so that we can learn from it and kind of understand a bit more about what it takes to create these videos. There will still be other video generation platforms that exist. And I think the likes of Kling and Nano Banana and what the other ones that are running, they just don't do as high fidelity, and they have caps on length of time you can create videos. So you can't be making a whole film for $20 in the same way you probably could have through Sora. So Sora is no more. Don't go there to make you memes, Jag. And there'll be other platforms. And hopefully it's a bit of an eye-opener into the fact that the creative industry may be saved by the fact that it costs too much to compute to do video in the same way it costs to do text.
I think this Sora story is fascinating because it's a reminder that technical spectacle and business viability are not the same thing. Sora may have been one of the clearest examples yet of an AI product that won the imagination but lost the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I am also happy that something has failed because there's just so much AI slop out there, like so much. And for now, at least, I really don't think there is a program out there, whether it's subscription based, whether it's free, that can create like really good images or really good videos. I really don't think there's anything, like off the shelf right now that can do that.
Well, I will counter that. And maybe I will give us a final sentence before we finish the pod for the week, because Sea Dance is actually excellent. It's very, very good, but do not use it because it is got huge copyright and IP infringements. And I really don't recommend anybody puts anything into it, takes anything out of it, especially if you're working in a professional setting. I wouldn't even put it into pictures, but it is excellent. The output from it is very, very good.
Might use it on like my personal, just to test it out. But yeah, that's a good tip.
Just don't upload pictures of yourself if you're going to do it on your own personal.
I won't. I mean, yeah, no.
Wait, what? Don't upload pics of yourself? Oh, damn.
Gotta go.
Okay. One quick closing question for you both. Just a few words from either of you would be great. So we covered a lot of topics today. In the next phase of tech, what do you think will matter most? Innovation, economics, or trust?
Well, I think from a user perspective, innovation. I think from a business perspective, economics, as we've just learned. And I don't think anyone cares about trust.
From me, I think it's innovation. Yeah. I think at the rate that we're going, everyone is like on hamster wheels, trying to get out the layers and the grayers. But hopefully, yeah, someone manages to, well, everybody thinks a lot more about functionality and meaning before pushing out more slop.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Felina. Thank you for those closing words. And thank you, listeners. This has been episode 111 of Disconnected, and we'll see you on the next one.